Good Friday afternoon, everybody. Rob O'Connor here from RobVinoSports.com, getting ready to break down the NCAA Football National Championship game. To break it all down, X's and O's, talk about who's going to come out on top Monday night. I need to bring in the founder of Rob Vino Sports, none other than Rob Vino himself. Rob, how are you?
I'm doing good, Rob. How are you today, buddy?
Doing very well. We saw a couple of games last weekend that were relatively low scoring compared to what we're used to in college football. We saw a couple of games that weren't overly exciting either in terms of the outcome being in doubt, in terms of the back and forth drama. So are Clemson and Alabama ready for a very exciting game? Do you expect more low scoring? We'll get into all that, but first, just what did you see with Bama on the field against Washington, and what did you see with Clemson on the field against Ohio State?
Well, a couple of things in the Alabama game, Rob. I think it's the second game in a row, if we go back to the SEC championship game, where we saw Alabama quickly go down 7-0. In the Florida game, SEC title game, Florida got really excited. Austin Appleby had thrown a touchdown pass, and they thought they were well on their way. And before we could blink, Alabama had put 16 points on the board. And then we saw the same thing against Washington. Washington got on the board, nice drive, touchdown pass, a 7-0, an excited sideline. And before you could blink, Alabama had matched that touchdown, and Washington wouldn't see the end zone or even be able to split the uprights for 3 points for the remainder of the day. So you don't get very many opportunities against that defense, boy, and you have to capitalize when you do. I think the youth in Washington showed up a little bit on that day, with only 5 seniors on the squad, and I know that they have guys that performed well throughout the season, but until you see Alabama's defense, you just don't know what to expect. After the touchdown drive, like I mentioned, Alabama got the best of them. Somewhat impressed with Alabama and their ability to wear Washington down, maybe the last quarter and a half of that game. Bo Scarborough obviously has gotten a lot of the coverage for his running in the fourth quarter, especially. Alabama goes for 269 on the ground in that contest. And, just an old-fashioned, really street fight kind of game, which you're not going to beat Alabama in. Really doesn't matter who you are. The Ohio State-Clemson game, Ohio State had a chance right off the bat, right? They pick off Deshaun Watson. They get the ball on their own 33, or on the Clemson 33, I believe it was, and couldn't do anything with it. Missed a field goal. Next drive, missed another field goal, and they wind up down 7-0. And for lack of a better phrase, the route was on at that point. So impressed with both of the favorites. They both dominated statistically. If you just go to total yardage summaries in those two ball games, Alabama beats Washington 326-194. Held Washington to just a host of season lows from an offensive statistical standpoint in that game. The 194 total yards, the 2.9 yards per play, the 1.5 yards per rush, 44 yards rushing. Alabama did a number on Washington, including sacking the quarterback 5 times. And for Clemson, probably slightly more domination total yardage-wise, 470-215. And when we look at the play count in that game, Rob, Clemson plus 29 total plays, 85-56, dominated time of possession. Again, it's not exactly the type of performance you expect from Clemson in that they don't necessarily defeat teams in that fashion, winning time of possession by double-digit minutes and by getting, 30 more plays than the other side. But they did it to Ohio State based on their defense and based on their ability to control the football. So, we saw this last year. Everybody, for the most part, wanted to see it again. I think Clemson's got a bigger bandwagon heading into this game, more believers in the Clemson side in this game. We'll see what happens, but I think you have to be impressed by both of the favorites. And more than that, you have to be impressed with the amount of times now that Alabama has won games by double digits. Teams just don't come close to them. In this game, we're looking at a 6.5-point spread. So we'll see if Clemson can do what they did last year and stay within 5, or perhaps even win the game this time around.
Well, I guess let's just, before we get into the X's and O's, I just want to add I thought that the most impressive thing of the entire set of games was Clemson's defense to shut out the Ohio State offense. Not an easy thing to do, especially in a big game like that. Ohio State, a perennial powerhouse team, and to come in there and dominate them like that. If they're able to have 60 to 75% of the same success defensively against Bama as they had against Ohio State, I think there's a very good chance Clemson could pull the upset with the defense carrying them more than the offense. But I think that for really the first time all year, you saw the Clemson team show up 100% in all phases and facets of their game, save the Deshaun Watson early interception. You thought, oh, maybe it's going to be a bit of a rough go for Clemson. Maybe they're not fully ready for this game. Maybe they're not fully into it. We've seen them not show up before. Clearly not the case. They played what I consider to be their most complete football game of the season on both sides of the ball. And if they can put another effort like that in again next week, Alabama should be on upset alert.
Yeah, and it's what people have been calling for all season long, right? Including, the Clemson Tigers themselves. Deshaun Watson said it earlier in the year. We've heard it throughout the season after the Pittsburgh game. The demolition of South Carolina at the end of the season, I think, was the first time that Clemson themselves felt like they had put 60 minutes together, the 56-7 rout of their in-state rival. Then they come back with the ACC championship effort against Virginia Tech, where, they were held to the fire right to the end, even though they built up a big lead. So a little bit of an up-and-down season, but when their A game is present on the field for all 60 minutes, and we've seen it twice now in their last 3 games. If you take the South Carolina and Ohio State game, you come up with a, combined final score of 81-7. That's the Clemson that people have been looking for all season long, and that's the Clemson, I think, that many expect to show up on Monday night against Alabama.
Well, let's hope so. If that Clemson does show up, it's going to be a very, very good football game. A little bit of off-the-field news with Alabama. Lane Kiffin out as the offensive coordinator. Nick Saban clearly not happy with the offensive performance against Washington. Granted, Washington does have a good defense, but I think you probably look for a little more out of the offense than they gave you. I mean, one of the touchdowns was a defensive touchdown. Another touchdown was kind of one big play, a 68-yard touchdown run. And then they really did have the one strong drive where they answered the Washington touchdown. But other than that drive, the offense was kind of bogged down and stagnant all day. Do you agree with the move to let Kiffin go, and how will this affect Alabama as they prepare with Steve Sarkisian as the offensive coordinator for the title game?
Yeah, there's a lot of facets to this deal, right? Because obviously Lane Kiffin had been spending, and rightfully so, spending a lot of time on his new job as Florida Atlantic head coach, and, split the other half of his time with prepping Alabama for the semifinal game against Washington. So it seems to me that there wasn't enough time to go around. Lane Kiffin kind of said that himself, that, for Florida Atlantic, Rob, and we know this, it's a hot point of the season. Recruiting signees, the National Signing Day happens in the first week of February. It's not that far off. There's a lot of work for Lane Kiffin to do where that school is concerned, and the time led to him being late for a practice, him missing a team bus, and I think Nick Saban probably just said, we can do without all this. I don't think Nick Saban makes a move that he thinks is going to be a deterrent to his team. So despite the fact that nationally it's been a big story this week, how, some folks don't see Steve Sarkisian being able to step in and call plays, and this might be a detriment to the Alabama offense on Monday night. I'm not so sure that will be the case only, and I base that solely on the fact that I don't think, or I've never seen Nick Saban do anything, make any move that he believes is going to hurt his team in the long run. And for him to make the move, he's probably of the belief that Sarkisian can do the same job Kiffin did, that Sarkisian has enough knowledge of the offense, having been with the team now for quite some time, and the fact that he's going to be the OC next year, no time like the present to step in and get things done. There's going to be a lot of help, obviously. I'm not so positive that every single one of the play calls in Monday night's championship game will be made by Sarkisian, and I'm sure offensive coaches in the meetings here have a lot of input into what goes on. I'm sure Nick Saban on the sidelines Monday night may override some stuff. But I think it's probably making a mountain out of a molehill. I'm not so sure Lane Kiffin not being there to call the plays is going to make that much of a difference in the production of the Alabama offense on Monday.
Well, Rob, I kind of agree with you, and simply for the fact that Nick Saban has such control of his program, and really nothing happens at Alabama without Nick Saban's complete 100% buy-in and blessing, and nothing happens suddenly where he's just going to make a drastic move without thinking it through, without really believing that it's in the best interest of his football team. It might have created another small distraction, but at the same time, he was probably removing a much larger distraction from the equation by getting rid of Lane Kiffin prior to the title game. I mean, there's nothing to stop Nick Saban from getting involved and calling some plays himself.
Yeah, no, that's all very true. Like I say, I come from that same viewpoint. There's too much at risk here for Alabama. And Saban never publicly states personal goals, but we all have seen that with this national championship, I believe he will tie for the most of any head coach in NCAA football history. So there's a lot on the line for him, although he puts his team first. And then, you'll always hear him say that and everything's in the best interest of the team, and he wants the team to succeed. So he's not going to put them in harm's way. I don't believe, I think the way this probably went down, Rob, and again, you and I are not privy to any conversations between Saban and Kiffin, but if you do enough reading and you look between the lines, you can sort of gauge out where he gave Kiffin the opportunity to go take a head coaching job, and maybe with the caveat that if this interferes in any way, shape, or form with our preparation over the course of the next month and a half, then, I'm going to have to let you go. And I think that's probably the way it went. Saban saw what was happening, that time consumption toward the Florida Atlantic job was becoming too big for Lane Kiffin, couldn't devote 100% focus to the Alabama team. And if you can't devote 100%, whether you're a player, coach, or any part of that Alabama team, Nick Saban is not going to keep you around. So I agree with you. He thought this through. He had Plan B in line. He's comfortable with Plan B. If he's comfortable with it, then I guess I have to be too. No reason to doubt what Nick Saban's done. No, certainly not.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100% in that. Let's move on to what do you think the biggest X factor in the game is going to be? Mine is, does Jalen Hurts finally get caught up in the moment in a big game? It's hard to believe, but he is still a true freshman leading this team. He came in midway through the second quarter of the USC game in week 1 and hasn't looked back. So he's got a ton of experience. But the fact of the matter is he is still a true freshman, and this is a huge, huge moment for him, and he's going to be going up against the Clemson defense that, as we saw against Ohio State, is capable of playing very, very good football. On the other side of the ball, on the other side of the coin, you've got Deshaun Watson, been in this moment before, played against Alabama before, knows what it takes to win this kind of a football game. And I just kind of look at that as the X factor. Does Jalen Hurts not play as well as he's played all year? because of the moment and the situation.
Yeah, it's interesting to look at the Jalen Hurts angle in this game, Rob, because if I compare it to what J.T. Barrett brought into the contest against Clemson last weekend, Jalen Hurts has a lot of things at his disposal that Barrett did not have. When we talked last week, when we broke down this game, and I had thought that the Clemson wide receivers against the talented Ohio State secondary was going to be a big matchup, and if Clemson could win in that matchup, they'd probably win the game. And that can be applied again here in this contest. But the other aspect of that was J.T. Barrett at quarterback didn't have a real good wide receiving crew, didn't have a real good year throwing the football, and he was going to be counted on to have to run the football against that Clemson defense, and Clemson knew that. And Barrett was shut down, and Clemson was savage in their front seven because really Ohio State was a one-dimensional team. When we take a look, and let's just start with Hurts and Barrett, even though there's an age difference there between, one guy coming back next year for a redshirt senior season and J.T. Barrett, so he's got a lot of experience under his belt, and a true freshman in Jalen Hurts, who is finishing out his first season with Alabama football. They're both inconsistent passers, no doubt about it. The difference between the two is that in the case of Jalen Hurts, he has Calvin Ridley, Adarius Stewart, O.J. Howard at tight end, who we saw come up big last year in the championship game, and Gary Dieter, a wide receiver who, for those who follow MAC football, remember him playing for Bowling Green and Dino Babers the last couple of years. Fantastic wide receiver and also a very good blocker. So he's got far more ability when he does complete a pass to make the most of that pass play. Ohio State really had no deep threats, couldn't stretch a defense, no home runs, no game breakers. So I think even though Hurts is not a better throwing quarterback than Barrett was, Hurts has a little more at his disposal. He's more capable of the big play just because of the guys surrounding him. You throw in the running game, and I just feel like he'll be better off than J.T. Barrett was. J.T. Barrett had to be the center of the show. Jalen Hurts does not. I think, when you watch him run too, Rob, it seems as if Jalen Hurts is a stronger runner than is J.T. Barrett. It takes a lot of contact to bring Hurts to the ground. Pretty strong guy. So, he's a freshman. There's been big lights on him all season long. I thought he might falter in in game one against USC. He didn't when he came in the second quarter to replace the starter in that game and then took the job from there on out. There were other cases that we thought he would falter. The worst game against a real good defense that I think the two of us can remember him playing was against LSU, right? He really didn't do anything against that LSU defense, but they won 10-0. So he's got more weapons than what Barrett had, and it makes it a little bit easier for him. Deshaun Watson certainly has all his weapons, and that's another story. Well, I'll let you start off getting to the other side of the football.
So, I think Deshaun Watson, I still think, and we've seen it a couple times this year, where Bama just has these lapses, whether it's a quarter or a half. Sometimes it's just 2 possessions where they get down 3 touchdowns against Mississippi, or they don't score for an entire half against, which is a very good LSU defense, or they struggle for a quarter against USC at the beginning of the season. Whatever the case may be, I think that if Bama puts together a 1 to 2 quarter stretch of not their best football, and Deshaun Watson is playing at his highest level, and the Clemson defense, whether it's forcing a turnover or getting a couple of quick 3-and-outs, and if they can get 10, 13, 14 points in a 2 or 3 possession span where Bama's doing nothing, I really think that could kind of set it in gear. And if Clemson's able to control the ball like they did against Ohio State, there's a really good chance that they're going to keep Bama away from the big play. If they can keep that 68-yard run away, if they can prevent Hurts from scrambling 40 yards up the middle for a touchdown, whatever it may be, if they can force Bama to have to really work to get their first downs and to limit their time of possession and not let them get up 14, 17 points and just try and grind it away, I really think that I personally like Clemson plus points. I think everyone can tell from the tone of the conversation. I just think there's such a bigger opportunity for Clemson than there is for Alabama. I don't know how you feel about that per se, but I just think when you look at it as an overall, I think there's more ways things could go right for Clemson, and I would like to take the points and think we're going to see another great game, and it's going to come down to a field goal either way at the end.
Yeah, and I think the deal with Clemson is if they can control the football. The biggest problem for Clemson this year, and I'm going to speak from a point spread view here now, and it's a different point spread view because, let's face it, Clemson was favored all year long in their games, and here they come up in this situation as an underdog, so maybe it's not fair to compare the two. But when Clemson failed point spread-wise this year, it was due to sloppiness. We talked about it last week. It was due to turnovers. Straight-up-wise, they were able to overcome turnover deficits in games where they lost the turnover margin but still won the football game but couldn't cover. That's laying points. Here, getting points is probably a different story. Maybe they can afford to barely lose the turnover battle and still cover at plus 6.5. You know, heading into last week's game, they had played 3 consecutive games and only committed 3 turnovers. The game before that was against Pittsburgh. They committed 3 turnovers in that one game. It goes to show you the difference towards the end of the season. They were more cognizant of protecting the football. They did a far better job of it. Then Deshaun Watson came out in the game last week against Ohio State, and on the first possession immediately threw a pick. Didn't hurt them because the defense rose up to the occasion and stopped Ohio State. Ohio State winds up missing a field goal. I think the whole thing lies there. Alabama, not necessarily prone to the turnover. Clemson, when they're bad, has been, and I shouldn't say bad, Clemson, when they haven't been 60 minutes worth of A-game Clemson, it's been because of sloppiness with the football. So they were laser sharp last year, right? You can't blame last year's 45-40 loss in any way, shape, or form on the offense. I think that the difference in that game, and I think anybody who watched it would tell you that the difference in that game was made by special teams. Alabama had a couple of big plays on special teams, which accounts for the 5-point victory in the national championship. If they can play clean football, they're probably good enough to hang right in with Alabama. But Deshaun Watson is going to have the type of throwing night that he had last year. Remember, they had guys running free all over the place last year. It really was amazing that Alabama's defense got shredded the way it did last season by Clemson. I don't think anybody expected that coming into that game. Watson did a great job there. They've seen Alabama once. The good news for them is that they've seen Alabama once, and they're going to see it again. Maybe they can prepare for any stuff that was negative for them last year, turn that into a positive this year. So, you know, from an offensive standpoint for Clemson, hang on to the football. Going to have to do it with the passing game because I really don't see any way Wayne Gallman has a big night running the football against this rush defense. And, boy, if Watson gets time, you know, it's interesting, too, Rob, both of these teams, great pass rushes. I think Clemson on the season, 45 sacks, Alabama 43, heading into their championship games last week. So you've got fierce pass rushes on both sides, both quarterbacks mobile and able to avoid some of the pressure, but that could wind up being a key, too. So there's so many variables in this contest that you can make cases for both sides, and that's what bookmakers love. And I think that's why we haven't seen any movement on this game. I mean, Alabama opened 6, and for the most part, they've went to 6.5 and have sat there for the better part of the last 5 days. Not a heck of a lot of movement. We'll see what the weekend brings and what.
Do you think we get to 7 at some point?
It's hard. It's really hard because it's such a key number. And bookmakers don't want to jump there, but if they get that flood of Alabama money, then they have to. I don't know that I've talked to enough people, Rob. I'll put it this way. I don't know that I've talked to enough people to see Alabama getting up to 7. I think that in a slight majority of the conversations I've had, the lean is towards Clemson plus the points. For that reason, I think we'll probably see this 6.5 hold. But you never know where the public's going to come on Monday night. You know, all the $20, $50, $100 bettors will be out in full force on game night. So a singled-out event, biggest event of the year in college football, going to be a lot of money spent. And normally that money comes on the favorite in the total going over. However, Clemson isn't your classic underdog, and I think people feel comfortable betting Clemson in this situation. So it'll be interesting, but I don't think we're going to see this line go anywhere. I think if you like Alabama, you might as well just go bet it now because you're not going to get any better than this. I don't think the line's going to go down too much. But if you like Clemson, maybe you can hold out for a little longer. I just don't know if it's going to benefit either way, Rob. I really don't.
Well, Rob, we need to wrap this one up. Quick hitting podcast just to give our thoughts on the game. Before we go, do you care to offer a final score?
Well, I will say this. For those listening, if you visit Rob Vino Sports this weekend, we do have a client selection on this game, so we won't divulge that here, but you can obviously get involved. Go to Rob Vino Sports, sign up, and go ahead and get to play for Monday night's game from our client service. Not so sure where you and Derek lie, but for those listening, Rob and Derek always each and every week with plays on the NFL and college football and college basketball, which me and Rob will be talking about in the weeks to come. But NFL playoffs big too, so I would just go ahead and visit Rob Vino Sports. I think it's going to be a heck of a game. I think we got the rematch that you and I both foresaw a few weeks ago. I think we both wanted it to end up this way or thought that this would be the best chance for Alabama to face a real test. So we'll see how it turns out. But once again, homepage Rob Vino Sports, the premium selections portion of that website will lead you right into the fee and the client service play on Monday night's national championship game.
I will also be having a play on the game. I think it will be a field goal either way. So obviously we know Clemson working on a total play. So I don't want to give a prediction on what I actually think the final score will be because I do believe we're going to have a premium play on the total come Monday night. Just looking at a few more things here as game time draws a little bit closer.
Yeah, it should be a heck of a night. Like I say, the anticipation will grow once the playoffs are over in the NFL Sunday night. And, you know, we couldn't ask for a better one, right, Rob? I'm trying in my head to think of a matchup that would have been preferable to this one for the national title, but I just don't believe that there was one this year. I think you and I alike have been of the belief for the last, month, 5 weeks, 6 weeks since the rankings came out, that Clemson was the team that would give Alabama the biggest test. And now we're going to see if they can get their revenge from last year. We'll see.
Absolutely. RobVinoSports.com for all of our premium selections, not only on the title game, but as Derek said, NFL playoffs this weekend. We got a ton of great college hoops matchups, a lot of top 25 action this weekend. RobVinoSports.com. It's a great resource for all of your handicapping needs. So get there, RobVinoSports.com. For the final time this college football season, for Rob Vino, I am Rob O'Connor. Enjoy the game Monday night.